that way we won't obviously capture your face. But other than that, we're going to be recording this so people have a chance to watch it later if they haven't, or review it if they'd like to do that. In the session this morning, right now we have 102 people. I feel like the brother and sister act down at Disney. If you ever watch those guys on Friday night, my wife is a avid Disney fan, and they do some streaming down there. And so when they hit 10,000 people, they get really excited. So for me, when I hit 100 people, that was probably the largest single group we've done, at least the ones I've done. But in the session this morning, in addition to myself, is Dr. Mary Hansen. You're going to have Mary this afternoon to talk about assessment. And then I will be back tomorrow morning to finish this up by talking about how we're going to blend all these things together. This is an exciting opportunity for us because at Robert Morris, we do have the certificate in online teaching that frankly has not been widely embraced by the teaching community. We've had it for about the last 5 years. But I can tell you that Mary and I and a few of the other faculty have been quite busy this summer, as you might expect, with this pandemic and how it's changing our lives. I mean, you know, and what I really like about this workshop is, you know, praying to God that we all get back into the classroom someday real soon as a matter of course, and this will all be just a bad memory. The things that we want to talk about, the things that you've been using to continue to teach your students since May the 13th, when this all started, will never go away. We've had teachers that said, you know what, even if I go back to the regular classroom, I've learned so much about how to deliver courses to students that need remedial learning, that need to be challenged with enrichment activities, that the technologies that you're teaching us, that we're being asked to use, whether it's sessions like this or some of the other materials that I'm going to show you this morning, will continue to be something that will be in our bag of tricks for teachers. We'll never go back to the way we were. And so that's great that we're doing this for you. Deer Lakes is one of the school systems that has really jumped out ahead to make sure that their teachers are comfortable with this technology. It simply takes a lot of practice. There are things that we're going to cover in the 3 workshops that I hope will be of tremendous benefit for you. Both Mary and I teach in the Department of Education at Robert Morris. Both of us have been there for quite a while. And I think both of us have been, I know both of us have been teaching online on online courses for several years. This summer, or this fall at Robert Morris, I've got 3 online courses and 1 face-to-face, which, like you guys, kind of worries me a little bit. We're going to have to see how that goes. And I know Mary's got several online courses as well. We all teach undergrads, masters, and doctoral students. And we have created this little team to offer these kinds of sessions to school districts in Western Pennsylvania. So great. Thank you for being here. I'd like to spend just a minute talking about some administrative issues with Google Meet, and then we're going to go ahead and get started. For those of you that are not familiar with Google Meet, we now have 107 people in our session, which means that for all practical purposes, we're going to have to ask you to remain on mute so that we don't pick up the occasional barking dog, crying child, ringing telephone, or who knows what else might run across your audio. The video you can keep your video on just as long as you'd like. You can also, if you move your mouse around the screen, you'll see a menu bar that pops up down at the bottom. You can mute your microphone by clicking on the little speaker there. And I think you've got to be at least as old as I am to recognize that as a microphone. Okay, back in the old days, that's what microphones used to look like. So you can click that. Again, we'll try to keep you muted. In the middle, don't click that. That's the way to hang up and leave the meeting. And so I know the first couple of times I thought that was like maybe a way to talk on my telephone or something, and I keep clicking that and dropping out of the meeting. So don't do that. Next to that is your camera. Again, if we seem to have any issues with the network connections, if we seem to have any problems with the voice and coming through a little rough or breaking up, we'll ask everybody to turn off their camera, which will improve the network connections. But Google Meet seems to be pretty good. I don't think we'll have any real problems. To the right of that, well, there'll be some other things that we'll talk about tomorrow, so we won't spend any more time on that. Way to the right are three little vertical dots. If you click on those, again, I'll show you some of the other features tomorrow that deals with delivering a synchronous lesson like we're doing here. But I just want you to know that you can change the layout of your screen. For right now, that'll be the only one I'll show you. And if you change that layout, you can see more people or less people depending on what you want to do. Okay, and then what's more important, I think, for today is up at the right. Top right, you should see a pop down that says people, and it shows right now 108, and right next to that a chat. If you click on the chat, please feel free to communicate with me as we move through the session with questions that you might have, and we'll try to stop periodically and answer those questions. So rather than popping up on your microphone and ask a question, let's use the chat room. And Dr. Hanson will be there as well. She'll be there to answer some of the questions or interrupt me so that we can talk about them together. Okay, so that's how we're going to go. There still might be a couple people popping in and out, so I'll try to get them into the sessions as quickly as possible. So we all set? All right, looks like you're all sitting nice and safely at home. These three workshops that we have set up, as you know, today we're going to talk about facilitating asynchronous learning sessions, which means your students are not going to be with you. One of the issues with teaching online, and we have this at Robert Morris too, we have certain classes identified as online courses. And for a definition of an online course is an asynchronous course, which means the students are not expecting to meet us at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning to have a session like this where they can interact with the teachers. They're expecting to have access to a website. We use Blackboard at Robert Morris. A lot of the schools now are using Google Classroom, but they expect to have 24/7 access to the materials that the instructor wants to make sure that they have. It might be video lectures. It might be discussion boards. It might be narrated PowerPoints. It might be any of the many tools that we're going to talk about this morning. That is distinguished from a hybrid course, which is designed to be a combination of things that the student can do by themselves asynchronously and the things that we want to do with the students in front of us, synchronous. And so tomorrow, we will look at how we blend both of those kinds of lesson formats together. We're going to talk async today, and we'll talk sync tomorrow. Okay, so that's kind of what we have in store. And to make sure that all of this really actually works and is productive and does what it's supposed to do, Dr. Hansen's session at 1 o'clock this afternoon on online assessment is the perfect tie between these two. How do we assess students in an online environment? Some of it's the same, a lot of it is different. And so you picked the three, I think, most important workshops that we offer in this package of several others that allows you to really hit the ground running. Now, with 108 people, I guarantee a couple of things. Number one is some of you will know more about the material that we're going to present to you than others. And so, the idea with 100 people in there is we want to raise the bar. We want to float the boats higher with everybody. So as we get started, if we start talking about something that you already know how to do, hey, good for you. That's great. Because when we finish with this, I'm going to give you a challenge, both of us will, a challenge that, hey, these workshops should not stop tomorrow at 11 o'clock when we're done with the third one. That a school like yours, once they get this kind of training, will only move forward with the collaboration of its teachers. And so we will challenge you when we finish tomorrow to do something with the material that you're going to be presented. Okay? Create a lesson. Work on some instructional resources for an online course. Work together as a group. Create an in-service training that expands a little bit on this. In a previous school that we did, they've actually asked their teachers to prepare an online lesson, okay? And they're going to use one of their first in-service trainings to talk about what they did, what they learned from the workshops, and how they can infuse that into their own classes. And I would challenge you to do exactly the same thing, okay? And it will be the innovators. It will be the teachers that are comfortable with this technology that will help the rest of us continue to explore the many things that we can do online. It's an exciting environment. When I first started doing this back in '96, I had some communications with one of the first cyber schools in Western Pennsylvania, PA Cyber. You probably heard about them. And I was talking to the superintendent at the time, and he was saying, hey, we're going to create this cyber school, and I am going to have all certified, Pennsylvania certified teachers. And I said, you know what, that's great, that's wonderful, but are they certified to teach online? And he said, ooh, good question. I know they're certified to teach in a classroom, but what other skills do they need to have to be able to teach online? Well, you guys could probably give me a whole slew of additional skills and competencies that you have used since March the 13th to teach your students. A lot of it's the same, thank God, but some of it is different. And some of those skills require some additional familiarization. And that's what we're going to do this morning. So with that as an introduction, I am going to turn my screen so that you can see what is on my computer. So this should be popping up here very shortly. If you can see where it says you're presenting to everyone, give me a thumbs up in front of your screen there so I know that this is working good. Excellent. Okay. So and this is actually one of the skills that we'll talk about tomorrow when we do the synchronous, how you can use Google Meet to present information to your students. So you now see everything that is on my screen that's kind of right in front of me. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a PowerPoint presentation, something that you would all be familiar with, to talk about this topic today. Okay. All right, so here we are. I think we all need to at least refresh our memories about teaching and learning theories as they apply to a distance learner. I've got 4 grandkids, and they're each been exposed to at least 2 different school districts in terms of how they're being taught online. 2 school districts and 4 very different teachers. And I've got 4 very different grandkids when it comes to learning. And you understand that, you're teachers, you understand that a distance learner has certain, characteristics of of learning. And we at least have to spend a few minutes this morning talking about the different kinds of learners that you're going to have at a distance. Okay, so if you'll just sit back for a second and let me do a little bit of a refresher with you that talks about learning theories. I'm going to give you some websites that you can go look at later on. I'm going to give you some additional materials that you can use to refamiliarize yourself with the schools of educational psychology. And most of you are going to sit there and say, oh my God, he's talking about stuff I had when I was a sophomore getting ready to be a teacher. For some of us, that's been a few more years than others. But in every case, it's important for us to at least do a little bit of a refresher. So we're going to start with that. And it's very, very important because at Robert Morris, we have a program for freshmen called our First Year Studies Program. Every freshman that comes to Robert Morris goes through a seminar for 1 semester in which they're introduced to a lot of the things that are peculiar to being a student at a university. And I used to go into almost all of the sessions. I mean, there was dozens of them. And I would always ask the same question to the students. I said, look, you guys are incoming freshmen. How many of you have ever had a course, a class, or even a lesson on how you learn? Okay, how do you learn, Miss Freshman? And I would ask for a show of hands, and I very rarely got any hands at all. Most of the students said, nobody's ever talked to me about that. I think I know how I learn. I mean, I try to do the same things every time, but I don't really have much of an understanding of how I learn. And if you guys remember when you were in college, that we talked about 3 real primary theories of learning. Okay. And we approach each of those three quite differently. The first and the oldest is behaviorism. And for those of you that remember B.F. Skinner and Ivan Pavlov, Pavlov's dogs and Skinner's rats and pigeons, you remember that probably 50% of our learners are behavioral learners, okay? They like to learn in a certain way. They like to be rewarded for their learning, okay? And so when we teach, we try to provide reinforcements to our students. It may be something as simple and common as grades that they get, or it might be something a little bit more like, they get some extra work, or they get some extra playtime, or they get candy, or, whatever the reinforcement might be. But when we teach to the behavioral students, we have to remember that to the behaviorists that all behavior is learned. And so we have to create a lesson, an online lesson that is carefully designed, okay? We just can't open up a Google Meet session like this and start talking. We lose the behavioral learner, and that's about 50% of your class, okay? So in the classroom, you might be able to respond to them very quickly. Online, especially async online, which is what we're doing today, you have to take steps to help the majority of your learners understand where the lesson is going. And we'll show you some of that today. A behavioral lesson is carefully organized, and it is sequenced from simple to complex, okay? From fundamental to more advanced. But if you're going to teach online, you have to provide resources and instructional materials that the behavioral learner can grow. Make sense? Remember that?
Oh, Larry, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a comment in the chat asking if you could either make your screen bigger or use full screen because it's a little hard to see.
Give me 2 seconds here and we'll make this. Okay. Does that help?
It looks better to me.
Okay. Okay. The second category of learner that we have is the cognitive learner. Okay. Now, the cognitive learner learns differently than the behaviorist. And the cognitive learner is about, another 30% of your class, 20%, let's say. Okay, 20 to 30%. And they're looking to a online course in which they see the material building. Okay, building blocks is the cognitive learner. Okay, they want to be more active in the process. The behaviorist is fine with picking up a PowerPoint presentation and going through it all by themselves. The cognitive learner wants participation. So I always tell my students, even in an online course, that we say is asynchronous. I tell them, look, I am not an asynchronous teacher. An asynchronous teacher will start you off in an 8-week course and say, look, here's your link to the Blackboard site. Here's your link to the materials. Okay, I'll see you in 8 weeks. And the behavioral learner won't have too many problems with that. The cognitive learner is not going to like that at all. Okay, and so that's why tomorrow's session on synchronous learning will give you some tips on how you can actually help the cognitive learner participate. Okay, it's an important strategy. So now you're thinking, well, wait a minute, how many lessons do I have to design here? And the answer is you had to do it in a traditional setting. you have to be even more cognizant of these theories in an online environment. So we got the behaviorist, we got the cognitivist, okay? And then the third group is the humanists. Now, these are the people, I once had I did a master's program in Northern Ireland and had the unbelievable, option of going over there and teaching Northern Ireland teachers. And I remember going into my class, and the first night I started teaching, and I'm rolling right along. I'm kind of a behavioral teacher myself, and I'm rolling right along. This is what we're going to cover. This is how we're going to do. This is what we're going to cover, and let's get started. And during the first break, a teacher came up to me and she said, we got a saying here in Northern Ireland. We don't care what you know until we know that you care. And I thought, point well taken. You're right. These were humanistic teachers for the most part. They want to know, they want to understand what they're going to be covering and why it's important to them. They have to personalize the information. They have to have communications with you as a teacher. And if they don't have that, they're not going to learn. So think about this for a second. As you create your instructional materials for teaching online, you also need to go back and think not only about the 3 different kinds of students that you have, okay? Your 50% of them are going to be behavioral, 30% are going to be cognitive, the other 20% are going to be humanists. You have got to understand and deliver resources online for all 3 of those. Okay. Hang on a second. I'm getting some bongs here. There may be a few more people trying to get in. Give me a second. Yeah. Okay. Okay. There we go. Don't want to leave anybody hanging out in the lurch here. Okay. And so I also want you to think about the learning objectives for your students. Are you dealing with learners at the various levels of Bloom's taxonomy? If you're a teacher now in K-12, like you guys, you at least remember Bloom's taxonomy, right? And what did he teach us? Well, he taught us that our learning objectives, the outcomes that we want from our students, ought to follow a pyramid, okay? At the lowest level, we got to teach our students knowledge, data, information, specifics, okay? But after they have the knowledge, then they need to move up this pyramid. We can't just keep teaching them facts, okay? And that applies just as well to online, because you're going to be looking at your learning objectives online, and you're going to have to be dealing with new and incoming students. And okay, so let's keep going here. We just got through doing this with a Catholic school, Mary and I. So the example that I use for this, just as a reminder, has to do with the 10 Commandments. Okay. All right. If I was to ask you, what is the 4th commandment? Okay. I would probably be taxing some of us, and, they've been out of Sunday school for quite a while. Okay. But I won't ask you to respond, but the 4th commandment is honor thy father and mother. Remember that? That is a knowledge. We can do that easily online. We can teach what is the 4th commandment, or what are all of the 10 commandments, and we can have the students list them back to us. But once I teach you a knowledge, I want an understanding. I want a comprehension. I want to add something to my lesson to make sure you understood what honor thy father and mother means. And then once you can do that, can you apply it in everyday life? If your mother asks you to do something and you decide not to do it, okay, are you applying the fourth commandment? Can you take that commandment apart? Honor. What does honor mean? Or take a more advanced one. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbor's goods. What does covet mean? Take it apart. What do their goods mean? Take that apart. And then put it back together in some everyday life situations. That's the synthesis. And then finally, can you take an example and evaluate it? Those were your 6 steps of higher order thinking that you learned when you started to become a teacher. Are you still applying those? Okay. You ought to go back to your lesson plans and you ought to look at the learning objectives. And if the objectives is, you know, what was the date of the Civil War, you're dealing way down here. Okay. If you're asking your students that after this lesson is over, I want you to be able to evaluate. I want you to be able to assess what the Civil War meant to the United States. Now you're dealing way up here. And the way you teach those things, synchronous or asynchronous, is very, very different. Now I'm going to put a link into the chat room here in just a second. And for those of you that say, oh my gosh, I would really like to go back and maybe look at this again, but it's been a while. Okay. I'm going to put this in the chat room and you can copy and paste it onto your computer screen and look at it later. Okay. When we first started doing our doctoral program, I had a number of students that that said, wow, it's been many years since I did this. Could you help me out? So I created this website that you can go back and take a look at your leisure. And it has, I call it a primer, you know, and it goes through these concepts of the schools of ed psych, because you gotta have this before you start thinking about teaching online. Okay. And as I tell my undergrads, first thing you got to figure out is how you learn. And so you can take this little quiz here of 8 statements. Okay. Do it on your own. We won't have time this morning to do it. About how you learn. Okay. Do you believe that learners, your students, need grades and gold stars and other incentives to learn? Okay. If you believe that, check that box. Do you believe that the students should be graded according to a uniform set of standards? I grade everybody the same way. Do you believe that students should develop positive relationships with their peers? How you answer these 8 questions will determine what kind of learner you are. And why is that important? Well, it's important because most teachers teach the way they learn. And so if you come out of this as a behavioral learner, you might not be thinking about your cognitivist and humanistic learners. And this will help you. And it goes through for pages and pages here on a really nice little primer on guys like Jean Piaget and Abraham Maslow and a few others. So have some fun with that on your own time, because we're not gonna have that kind of time here today. All right, so that's the introduction, and it's really important for us to set the groundwork for all 3 of these sessions, okay? And have you continue to recall the things that you learned back in the day, okay? So let's go ahead now and jump into facilitating an asynchronous learning lesson. Let's make sure we start with a definition. you know, asynchronous, okay, with the A in the front, okay, is a type of training where the students do not have to be with you, either in the classroom or online. They can do this 24/7, any day they want, anytime they want, and they don't need you there. There's no instructor to interface with them as they're going through the lesson. Okay, so what does that mean? You know, until we got into this online stuff, you probably never did this before. Okay, you probably never told the student, here's the textbook. You have to learn this all by yourself. And the next time I see you, I'm going to give you a test. You probably didn't do that. But when you teach asynchronously, that's exactly what it is you do. However, as some of our faculty have found out, asynchronous learning does not take you off the hook. It does not say, look, it's up to the student to learn this. It's kind of like the college lecture, you know, where the professor comes in and starts lecturing and writing on the board. And when it's all over, the bell rings and out they go. And it's up to the student. That's almost like asynchronous learning, okay? But that still doesn't leave you off the hook. If you're going to do online teaching, you have to have deadlines for your students. Worst mistake I ever made when I first started this was saying none of your assignments are due until the last day of class 8 weeks from now. You can work on them at your own pace. You can submit them when you want to, but on Friday of week 8 at 5 o'clock, everything is due. Well, guess what happened? I got a lot of junk, right? I got a lot of students that came to me on that Friday and said, I'm not going to finish on time. Well, what do you mean? You've had 8 weeks. You can't do that. Asynchronous learning, anything that you do with your students, that you give them an assignment, you have to give them a deadline. Otherwise, they're going to push it off. Okay? And online learning for the student demands just as much as online teaching does for the teacher. Okay? It's not easy to do asynchronously. What would you say is the number, use the chat room. What would you say is the number one skill that a student has to have? Where are you at? There you are. The number one skill a student has to have if they're going to be an online learner. Type something into the chat room for me. Organization, that's a good one. Organization, organization. Motivation, that's another good one. Discipline. Sarah Jane popped it right up. Time management. You all got good responses there. And do high school students have those skills? I'll leave that up to you. Okay, I know a lot of high school students that don't have the self-discipline to say, I'm going to do week 8 material, or excuse me, week 1 material in week 1. Okay, they have problems with that. They have a lot of problems with time management. Oh, I'll do it on Friday. Okay, and they don't get it done. So you have to provide deadlines. You have to provide assignment schedules. You have to provide timelines and milestones that that put the pressure on your students to learn. So let's turn our attention now to asynchronous tools. What can you put into a lecture? What can you put online? What can you give your students that will help them learn asynchronously? And I'm going to introduce to you each of these tools. Okay, we're going to learn some new things today, I hope. Okay, and we're going to start with audio video lectures. Okay, most of us have been teaching for a while. And in a college environment, particularly, I could end up teaching the same class in 3 semesters in a row, fall, spring, and then summer. And I like to think every once in a while, I deliver a lecture that just, you know, knocks the socks off. Just a perfect video lecture. And I wonder sometimes whether I've done it as well the second time or the third time. All right. And so when I teach online, I offer my students audio-visual lectures, things that they can watch. So it looks like I'm there. It's a lecture that I conduct on my own. And I record that lecture. And I put it into my asynchronous tools. So even though I'm not with them, they're still getting the benefit as if they were sitting in my class listening to me. Okay. Now, obviously, they can't give me feedback. They can't raise their hands. They can't ask a question. But I know that as an online teacher. And so if I offer an audio-video lecture as an asynchronous tool, I put something else in my course that allows them to give me feedback. It might be something we'll talk about later called a discussion board. It might be an email that they have to send me. It might be a paper that they have to do for me. Okay. But how do you create a lecture? Okay. I'm going to show you a package. Okay. And you can kind of follow along with me here. It's called Screencast-O-Matic. Okay. Screencast-O-Matic. And I'm just going to turn off my video here so that I can use the video here. Now, Screencast-O-Matic is the first tool that I'm presenting to you. And it is a tool for you to create your own video lecture. And it is so nice. It is so easy. And it's free. Okay? So as you create or deliver a lecture, even if it's a lecture that you're doing synchronously, and we're going to talk about that tomorrow, like I'm doing right now, I am recording what we're talking about here so that if one of your teachers wasn't able to get on today, they can go back and they can watch this recording. Okay. Now to do that, I have to have Google Meet and I have to follow the Google Meet, you know, laws and regulations and policies. But this package called Screencast-O-Matic that you can find right here at this website, screencast-o-matic.com, allows you to download a package that is very easy to download and you can start recording for free. So kind of watch what I'm going to do here, but write down, and by the way, we're going to be sending you these PowerPoint presentations. So you'll see this, this link right here. So you don't really have to write this down. So just watch. Okay. Once you get out to this website, you can start recording for free. Now, this is available for Chromebooks, for Macs, and for Windows. I'm going to show you the Windows version because that's what I have. Okay. But you can also be sure you download the right one. When you launch the recorder, that's how quickly it comes up. Okay. And this is called a screen capture package. Anything that's on your screen, anything that it hears in your microphone, it will capture in an MP4 file. Very simple. Look at this. You can tell it to capture the screen. Anything that is within those anchors will be captured, and only what's in those anchors. So you can have a PowerPoint presentation on one side, and you can put a Word document over on this side that has your script on it. Works really well. It can do just the web camera. And it's a little hard to see because that's the way it places it. But that's me behind there. Okay. And so you can do a video lecture, okay? And you can just talk to the kids just like you were standing in front of them in a classroom. Or you can do both. Okay, so let me make this a little bigger. And you can see it captures whatever is inside here, plus it puts my webcam over here. And it's just that simple. Now, the free version of this has a maximum recording time of 15 minutes. You can see mine says 30 minutes because I love this package so much and I use it so often that I went and bought the upgrade. And we'll talk about the upgrade in a second. The upgrade allows you obviously some additional features, including an unlimited max recording time. So if I have recorded 2-hour sessions, I can record a 2-hour session with this. Most students, especially 9 to 12 grades, and probably the same for college too, a 15-minute presentation is probably enough. Okay. Now you can do as many 15-minute presentations as you want. Okay. So if you just break your lesson up into 15-minute chunks, you never have to buy the upgraded recorder. Excuse me. Notice that the narration is going. You can see it's picking up my microphone here. Okay. And that's really about all there is to it. Okay. We can, once we get started with this, and we'll use both right now, I can set this up so that it is ready to record. Okay. And watch what happens when I click record. It just gives you a 3, 2, 1 countdown. Excuse me. And then it starts recording. It's picking up everything I'm saying, and it's picking up everything I'm putting on the screen. So I can scroll through a PowerPoint presentation if I want to and turn it into a video. Okay. When I click pause, it asks me if I'm done. When I click done, it allows me to save my file that I just created, the movie that I just created. Okay. And it lets me put it into one of 3 places. It allows you to save it to your own computer, which is what I like to do. Okay. I know it's on my computer. Excuse me. I can send it to my student. I can put it up on my my school webpage. Lots of things I can do with it. Problem is, I've now done so many of these, they start to take up a lot of disk room, disk space. You can upload it to Screencast-O-Matic. You can create an account on Screencast-O-Matic. And if you don't want to save it to your computer, you can save it to theirs, which is kind of nice of them, but not something I really want to do. And finally, you can upload it to YouTube. We have faculty YouTube accounts, and I can upload my my movie, because that's really what it is. I can upload that movie to YouTube, and my student can go get it there. 2 big advantages. Number 1, it's not on my computer. It's not taking up my hard drive space. And number 2, if you put it on YouTube, well, your students have all sorts of devices that can watch YouTube stuff. So they can do it on their Windows iPhones or the Apple iPhones. They can do it on the Androids. They can do it on their iPads. They can do it on, whatever they use is much more likely that they can watch it on YouTube than any of the other options. And that's really all it is, gang. Okay. Now I'm going to delete this because I don't want to save it. But that's about all there is. It's very easy to use. You can create a video and be ready in 5 minutes. Okay. So the upgrade version, let's see if it tells us what it is now. Yeah. Okay. I wouldn't go with the Premier. It's $4 a month. But as you might imagine, it offers you some more options, none of which I found to be particularly worthy of the additional money. The Deluxe is the one I have. I like it. additional video. They allow you to do some editing, which you really can't do with the basic version. It allows you to, what else does it do that I really like? Oh, and it gives you unlimited time. Okay. So for something like $24 a year or something like that, not even that, whatever 165 times 12 is, you can get the deluxe version.
Dr. Tomei, excuse me. I just wanted to let everybody know we do have Screencastify. They're very similar. And we have the upgraded version of that program.
Beautiful. That's what I need to hear from you guys as we go through this. Okay. I'm going to show you one thing. What I really want you to take away is not that Screencast-O-Matic is the best thing out there, but that doing an audio video lecture is one of the most effective asynchronous tools that you could possibly use. Okay, next I want to show you narrated PowerPoints. Most of you know how to do PowerPoints. I'd like to show you one that my students do for me in one of my master's classes and in one of my certificate programs. I call it an interactive lesson. Usually with PowerPoint, you're standing in front of the class and you're going through the PowerPoint. You're explaining things, and that's great. You could use that in a synchronous class, but in an asynchronous class, you have to develop a PowerPoint that allows the student to go through it all by themselves. Okay, and so my students create something called the interactive lesson. Okay, and I teach them how to use things like action buttons. I teach them how to give their instructions where they need it. I teach them how to ask questions online. Okay, I teach them how to give all of the content for a particular learning objective. Okay, how to use videos and audios. I teach them how to use sounds for feedback. I want to actually go back to that one, darn it. Okay, I teach them how to add narrations.
With patient education and the risk factors, it's important to stress. Okay,
so if they have students and you're dealing with a lesson and the content is too difficult, you might want to add your own narration there. So the interactive lesson gives them some additional references, some other resources, plenty of things that they can do on their own. But the purpose of the interactive lesson is to say, look, this is what I would teach in my class. But since this is an asynchronous class, you got to do this all on your own. So when you're done, and this is also a really good slide to narrate. As a teacher, look, students, by the end of this, I want you to be able to list all the risk factors for high blood pressure. So write them down as we go through here. Don't just flip through the slides. Okay? I give them a review. This is what you should already know about the subject before we get into new materials. Okay? It's called an interactive lesson. And it uses a feature of PowerPoint that you may or may not have ever used called the kiosk mode. Okay? And it shows you, I'll show you how to do that, or you can find it on your own. But the kiosk mode, you know, with a PowerPoint presentation, you know, if you hit the space bar or click the mouse, you move from one slide to the next. With the interactive lesson in the kiosk mode, the student can't. They have to have an action button. That's the only way they can move through it, either with a button or by creating action buttons with answers. And that's what makes this interactive. Okay? Very cool process, the interactive lesson. And I teach it in my class. The students create interactive PowerPoint presentations, narrated presentations. And here's your reinforcement for our sessions. I am actually going to send you after tomorrow's session, I am going to send you the textbook that I use to teach the interactive lesson and all sorts of other online instructional materials. I'll send you the free textbook. It'll be a PDF version. You can look at it and say, wow, that looked pretty cool. I never used action buttons. I've never used hide slides. I never used the kiosk mode. I'll send you the textbook. But those are called narrated PowerPoints, and they work just as good as the screen capture, okay? The advantage of the screen capture is you can do more with just you, with your picture. The advantage of the narrated PowerPoints is that you can do more with content here. A lot more. You can make this as long as you want, okay? And then I know you know how to do this, but in a PowerPoint, you can insert audio and you can record audio, okay? And when you hit this, you can see it's starting to record my audio. I'm going to talk to my students about this lesson on hypertension risk factors. You know, my name is Lindsay Bartaroni. I want you to watch this presentation, taking notes as you go through it, and complete a Word document study guide handout that I'm going to give you when this is over. You click stop, okay, and there it is. So I would suggest to you that if you're using any PowerPoint presentations in your online course, that you narrate those presentations, okay? And you give them to your students, or you give them access so that they can learn asynchronously. Okay, next thing I wanted to mention to you, kind of already did this, but again, if you look at our session here that we're doing right now, you notice that I am recording the session, okay? Google Meet that we're using here, Zoom that I'm going to show you tomorrow, and a package called Collaborate that I'm going to show you tomorrow, all have record functions in them. So how does a recording help you in a asynchronous class? And it's really very simple. When we provide, or when we offer a online class at Robert Morris, we tell the students there are no mandatory online sessions. I don't like that, but that was the way they described and defined an online course. So I cannot say, look, I'm going to do a synchronous session with you on Monday night. Everybody has to be there. What I can do is say, I'm going to have a synchronous session on Monday night, and I'm going to record it. If you attend the synchronous session on Monday night, you've got the content. If you do not attend the synchronous session on Monday night, you must watch the recorded video and do a 3 to 5 page paper for me, outlining the points that you would have discussed had you been in the discussion, along with any questions you might have about the content. Guess what happens? Yeah, most of the students will do whatever they can to make the synchronous session. because they don't want to have to do a 3 to 5 page paper. Excuse me. But this is another asynchronous tool for you. Take the recording, save it, make it available to your students, and they can participate. But have them do something. You know, with a synchronous session, I can watch your faces, unless you turn off your video. I can ask you questions. I can't do that if all they're doing is watching the video. Okay, but you ought to be recording everything. Now, I know some schools have policies saying that you can't record video. You got to live by whatever your school district is doing. Okay, but with Google Meet, when I hit the record button to start this recording, it came up with a warning, and it said, be sure you have everybody's permission before you continue with the recorded session. And so that's why I asked each of you. I said, look, we're going to record this session. You got 2 or 3 choices. Number 1, you can turn off your webcam if you don't want people to see your face. Number 2, you can punch out. I mean, I'm going to record it. If you don't want to see it, if you don't want to be part of that, you can punch out of the recording, okay, and you can watch the video. And I guess for you guys, there may be a third option that you might want to talk about, and probably already have, and that is, are you going to get parents' permission to do this? We just got through in the summertime doing a cyber camp for high school kids. And I had 14 high school students, some from freshmen all the way up to seniors. And I said, look, we want to record these sessions, but I can't do that without your parents' permission. Okay? I need to have your parents send me an email telling me it's okay to record you. And I didn't have any problem with that. So there's your options dealing with recorded synchronous sessions. Pretty good. So far you got 3 tools. Let me show you another one. Kind of one of my favorite. YouTube videos. Okay. I want to take you out to YouTube. Now, again, you guys are probably even smarter than this than I am, and that's fine. One great thing about teaching technology, especially to incoming freshmen and sophomores, is that these young kids are showing me stuff that I didn't know. And I embrace that. At least I like to think I'm the kind of teacher that says, you know what? I'm always willing to learn. Show me something new. Well, most of us are fairly comfortable with going out to YouTube, I think, by now. But I know in the last group I did, I had a bunch of teachers that said, I didn't realize that there was a special education site under YouTube. And here it is. It's just youtube.com/education. And all of the videos that are on this particular sub-element of YouTube are all dealing with education. And so you can come on to here and you can do, let's see what they have on the Civil War, you know. Now, you can do that on YouTube by itself, but I believe, and don't hold me to this, but I believe these videos have been vetted, okay, or at least recommended by an educator, okay? So going out to the Civil War, you're not likely to find garbage. These are all things from like the History Channel, the Discovery Channel, you know, and look at some of these. Certainly this will, going to YouTube/education will greatly narrow your search. Okay. And you can find, well, my gosh, just about everything here. Found one the other day on the Pythagorean theorem. So where's my math teachers here? Okay. You guys look at this and you say, well, there's nothing in here on math. Oh, yeah, there is. You know, here's a 20-minute video on explaining the theorem. In an asynchronous environment, this is exactly what you want. You might do a presentation. You might do a video lecture. You might do a narrated PowerPoint. But for the students that need more, that need it explained maybe differently than you're explaining it, youtube.com/education is a perfect way for you to populate your class with asynchronous videos that can help your students. Look at this. I mean, I remember when I first started this many, many years ago, probably 1994, 95. I used to run workshops, and I would tell my teachers that were in those workshops, here's the internet. I'll bet you, I'll bet you $5, and I put out a $5 bill, that you can't go out to the internet and find and put in any topic without finding at least 10 to 12 websites. Obviously, I don't do that anymore. Now it's more like 10 to 12 million websites, okay? So there's no reason as you create an asynchronous lesson for your class that you have to create everything all by yourself. There's all sorts of wonderful facilities for you. Okay? Another one I'd like to show you that is another real favorite of mine, and you would want to write this one down, is Annenberg Media. Okay? For those of you that know about the Annenberg Foundation, you know that Annenberg was a federally funded grant. And their goal and purpose was to provide as many resources as possible for the K-12 environment. And so if you go to learner.org, not learners, learner.org, okay, you have access to classroom resources that you cannot imagine. Okay, again, all excellent asynchronous resources for your classroom, almost all of which are free. Okay, so you can do a search. So let's do a search of high school. Let's do a search of science, okay, and see what they've got for us. Okay, here are entire lessons. I mean, 3-week, 4-week, 8-week lessons on science-based materials. This one is kind of one of my favorite. I don't know if the physics teacher at Deer Lakes has the opportunity of taking the kids to Kennywood, but when I was young, I had a physics teacher that took us to an amusement park and said, and we all thought, oh, you're going to have such a great time. This is wonderful. And the guy said, no, you're not going to have a good time. You're going to understand the laws of physics as they relate to roller coasters and tilt-a-whirls and the wild mouse and all the other things that would make us sick. And but here is the Annenberg Learner site. A lot of these have videos. A lot of them have additional resources. Here's one on the, look at this. Here's one on the Earth, okay? 26 videos, okay? And they're all about 28 minutes long. Okay, here's one on the Earth's interior. 28 minutes long and just beautifully done.
To it,
beautifully
much
done.
Less structure than the continents.
Why would you not want to add those to your asynchronous lesson. Okay, and this goes back to one of the first things I said when we started. Even if hopefully we get back to the classroom soon, these kinds of resources are perfect for your learners. Maybe you want to show them in class, maybe you want to give them to them as outside assignments. Okay, there's another one here that I just want to show you. Where'd it go? On psychology. Let's see if I can, sometimes. You got to be able to type. Come on, I know you're there. Well, I'll find it later. But it's called Discovering Psychology. And it covers a lot of the things that we talked about at the beginning of this class. Okay? Some really interesting videos on everything from Piaget to Skinner. Some really, really excellent materials. Okay, I'm going to try one more time. There it is. Okay. The Learning Classroom, Theory in Practice. I mean to tell you, guys, there's 14 of them here, and they are wonderful. They are wonderful. Okay. So that is Annenberg Media. Okay. Write down that link. It's a really good one. Okay. So those were kind of all of the audio visual presentations, all the things that you can do to bring audio or movies into your asynchronous classroom. Go out and find them yourself on YouTube or Annenberg Media, or create them yourself using Screencast-O-Matic, screen capture, or using recorded synchronous sessions or narrated PowerPoints. I hope right there that would be the value of this workshop that we are doing today. But that's not all I want to show you. Okay, discussion boards. Now I've been looking at Classroom, Google Classroom. And, you know, let's be honest about this. There are some classrooms that, some online resources that work, and some work a little better than others. Okay. Google Classroom, and I think Dr. Hansen will be able to give you more information on there. As we'll see tomorrow, though, we'll look at Google Classroom and Google Meet, and we'll compare that to Zoom, and we'll compare that to Collaborate Ultra. All three of those have their advantage, and all three of those have some disadvantages. In my way of thinking, some of the disadvantages to this format of Google Meet is that it doesn't have, it doesn't use all of its features inside Google Meet, okay? And one of the things that it doesn't offer is something as simple as a discussion group. It has extensions that offer you those features. Extensions which would make outstanding in-service training topics. Okay, guys, we're going to get together today and we're going to look at how you can use Google Meet discussions or Google Classroom discussions to do what Dr. Tomei showed us back in the summer on how to create a discussion group. Okay, So I really encourage you to do that. There are, well, I'm going to show you in a minute. There's a dozen of these kinds of little apps that Google is offering to augment its Google Meet. Some of those you'll see tomorrow are already into Zoom, are already into Collaborate Ultra. And you can imagine the biggest mistake I made about March the 14th. Okay, I don't know about you guys. Biggest mistake I made on March 14th was not buying stock in Zoom, right? Okay. I mean, if you look at the Zoom stock, it was like January, February, March, and then boom, March 13th, Zoom took off. Now, I kicked myself. I should have known that, because not only were schools using it, but every business in the world is using it. And probably most of us are pretty well fed up with Google Meet and Zoom by now that we're anxious to get back into the classroom. But anyhow, here is a discussion board that I created for one of my courses called Piaget's Experiments. Okay. And it's an asynchronous tool. You make them go watch a video. You have them look at a recorded session. You have them view a YouTube video, and then you have them give you feedback and interaction asynchronously with a discussion board. They don't all have to be online at the same time to do a discussion board. That's what makes it async. So you can see these students as they've answered these discussion questions. Okay, they have published many posts over here, talking with one another, asking each other questions, giving each other feedback about the reply that they made. So here's somebody's post. I have some mixed reviews about this video. Okay, and here's a reply. I like the videos. I would have loved to see them done better. Okay, I think the father, this was an interesting video. You know, one of the people in the video didn't do it right. Okay, and so think about creating a discussion board for your asynchronous lesson. Discussion boards are very exciting. One of the things that I talk about with discussion boards is some guidelines, okay? You got to ask the right question, okay? My wife she was an elementary teacher, and she had 6th grade class. And she got into this discussion with with the father of one of her students, because she had asked a question. And the question was, after spending nearly a week talking about the science and history of locomotive engines, she had just a beautiful lesson that she had done. Behavioral, cognitive, and humanistic. She had the kids wearing, you know, conductors' hats and going out to websites about what it meant to be the person that shoved the wood into the coal. Anyhow, she did a great job. She gave the final test on Friday, and she asked the question, she says, what makes a steam engine work? And she got back, and I'm sure you all shaking your heads, yes. She got back, a student that came back, and he said, steam. That was his answer. That's all they wrote, steam. And so she gave him a D-. And the parent called up and said, why'd you give my son a D-? Well, I gave him a D- because this is not a complete answer. It's not anywhere close to being a, you know, and so the answer, you know, obviously the suggestion I gave her was, well, you got to tell them more than just asking them the question. So in a discussion board, that's what we're talking about. Okay? You have to not only give them a question, but you have to give them a couple of paragraphs of exactly what you want. Okay? I want to hear about locomotives in terms of, you know, how they're powered and how, you know, when they appeared in history and, you know, what was it like to be an engineer? You got to have more than just asking them a simple question from which you will get a very simple answer. Okay. All right. So discussion boards, very, very useful. Also, one of the things I have that I can share with you, this may be a little hard to see. Let me try to make it a little bigger. Come on. There we go. Okay, is a rubric. You guys know about rubrics. Dr. Hansen will talk to you more about rubrics. But if you're going to create a discussion board, it's always a good idea to have rubrics in here. Okay? And notice this actually used to say, and probably should say, in my rubrics to my students, when I require them to reply to somebody else's post, I take away 10 points for spurious responses, spurious replies. What am I talking about? Okay. I get somebody who replies and says, I agree. Okay. Or, you know, I understand what you say. I agree with what you said. Those kinds of things, I tell my students, I actually take away points. Why? Because they contribute nothing to the post or the thread, and I had to read it. And if you're making me waste my time, I'm going to come back at you. Usually that only happens once and they get the idea. Okay? Interesting, huh? Discussion boards? Okay. Chat rooms. Now, I told you that chat rooms, and as you can see from some of the things going on in our own chat room here, and I appreciate those comments. Thank you. Keep posting them. That a chat room really only works for synchronous courses. I mean, you got to be there, right? A chat room is not really a very good possibility unless you're dealing with it in a synchronous modality. Okay, and so kind of keep that in mind, that's the case. However, there's other things to think about too. I've actually had chat rooms that have been done asynchronously. Okay, and so you can create yourself a chat room that everybody has access to. Tomorrow, I'm going to show you breakout rooms. Okay, and that's actually a better way. In a breakout room where, let's say you've got 20 students in your class, and you create 5 breakout rooms with 4 students in each one. Well, inside the breakout room, you can create an asynchronous chat room just for that team, just for those members of that room. And you can say, look, the chat room is there. Instead of creating a discussion board, maybe you don't like discussion boards for whatever reason, you can go into the chat room and you can post your questions or your comments. Okay? And it gives people simply another alternative. Okay? We'll talk about chat rooms again tomorrow when we talk about synchronous. But I'm showing you here how to get into the chat room in Google Meet. Well, you already know how to do that. And so let's just bring this other one up. Okay. And so you know how the chat room works. We won't spend any more time on that. Okay. And then the last thing I'd like to talk to you about for just a few minutes is the use of email in a synchronous, in an asynchronous environment. Okay. Obviously, email has been around the longest in terms of its use on the internet and the web. Email has been around long enough where everybody knows how to use email, and probably all of the real functions of email that make it important. Things like forwarding email, replying to all, attaching, creating attachments, and all of those things that go along with it. So the nice thing about email is it doesn't require you to have to teach any skills. Okay, and so we want to at least mention it here because there are very productive uses of email in an asynchronous environment. One of the issues with chat rooms, one of the issues with discussion boards is that for the most part, those kinds of communications are not private, okay? Even in a synchronous session, even in a discussion board, people have to identify themselves before they can post. And so a lot of students who are very hesitant about doing that, they just simply do not want to, put their name next to any comment, would be much more prone to send you an email. Heck, they might even send it to a couple of people. But sending it to 100 people or sending it to a 40-person class is not something that they're comfortable doing. So don't forget email, okay? It's just that if you're going to use email in an asynchronous lesson, you have to establish some ground rules going in, okay? For example, at Robert Morris, I tell my students, look, I send emails. A lot of them come from inside Blackboard, but some of the emails will come from me in my RMU account. I will only send email, and you all want to make sure this is the case with you. I only send email to RMU accounts, okay? And every semester, the first day of class, I get a student that sends me an email and says, I don't use my RMU email. I'd rather you send it to footballjock@yahoo.com. And I send them an email and I respectfully inform them that I will not send any emails to footballjock@yahoo.com or homecomingqueen@hotmail or anything else. That the only emails that they're going to get will be to their RMU account. Now, if they want to go into that account and forward it, that's fine, but that's up to them. I remember trying that one semester saying, okay, I'll send it wherever you want to send it. And oh my God, it does not work. Okay. So just a little tip. I use email as you probably do for lots of things. Class announcements, changes in schedule. At Robert Morris, we have a what's it called? Campus alert, RMU alert. And in the wintertime, when the weather's bad, that's how the students will know when the campus is closed. So I'm sure you guys have that as well. Well, my students know that 10 minutes after they get an RMU alert closing the campus, that they will get an email from Dr. Tomei that says, get online tonight. Okay, we're still going to have class and we're moving straight ahead. And actually, I'm hoping that this is an impetus for you to do the same thing. There's at least two school districts that I know in Allegheny County who tell their students, look, if we close because of bad weather, snow, power outage, water main break, whatever the reason is, their students know automatically and without question that they go to the school's website and they log into their class, because there's going to be school. And I would hope that if this appeals to you as an alternative, that you use what you're learning here over the next 2 days as a way of creating that class. Doesn't have to be, you know, a whole semester. Well, it did for the pandemic, but it won't when we get back to normal. You can still use the tools that we have to create a ready-made lesson that the students know that they can go to, and they can click, and they can learn something. It may not fall perfectly into your lesson plan sequence, but it's still a valuable lesson that would count as instructional time. And I suspect the state's going to be changing that real quick if they haven't already. That those will count as class time. Those will count as instructional days. I'd be surprised if they haven't done that already. But I've been surprised by PDE before, so let me. I'll take that out of the recording when I finish this. Okay, so assignments can be easily attached, and instructors can provide almost immediate feedback to students. Let me show you another little trick that I always have with my students. You'll see this pop up here in a second. Okay, get out of the way here and give me 2 seconds. Well, I guess I could show you here. This is the lesson that you looked at earlier, that interactive lesson. And notice that the file name has got the student's last name in it. Okay. It's a convention when it comes to email that I require of all my students. Okay. And since I am teaching 2 or 3 courses at the same time, I require my students to not only put in their last name, but in the email that I get from them, I require them to, see if I can bring this up real quick. I require them in the subject line to put the course number. You could have them put the lesson name, whatever it might be. Because I, like everybody, get a ton of emails every day. And I tell my students, in the subject of your email, better be the name of the course, the number of the course, because I have 2 or 3 courses going on at the same time. And that's how I separate them. Those little conventions like that regarding email just makes it very, very useful. Okay. Emails can be used for announcements, due dates, schedule changes, assignment modifications. And if I have a student send me a question that I know everybody's got, I just do a quick reply, reply all and send it to everybody. Okay. If it's something with a private question, obviously I don't do that. Okay. So, lots of different topics, lots of different things for you to discuss. I would like to spend just another couple of seconds talking about some other things that you can think about for your lesson. Let me just bring this back. I'll call these tips for effective lessons. Okay, tips for effective lessons. Let's bring these up. Okay, and this should say async, not sync. Although tomorrow some of these will be the same. But when you create your, your lesson materials, it's important that that you still create a forum for online collaboration. So that's why after I showed you all of the tools for creating asynchronous materials that I also showed you the discussion groups, the chat rooms, and the use of email. You have to have collaboration in your tools. Okay, it's extremely important that if you're going to do anything async, that you begin with a set of expectations, learning objectives, right up front. Now, I teach this a little differently to some of my undergrads who intend to be early childhood teachers. Okay, I tell them, look, you can create a PowerPoint presentation and you can put a learning objective in there, but your kindergarten, first grade kids are not going to be able to read it, right? So they have to be particularly cognizant of the fact that if you're doing something home asynchronously, that it's probably going to be the parents that are going to be establishing that lesson for the child. Well, some of you, even in 9 to 12, I'm sure ran across the same issues, okay, when you started teaching online, that, you know, you had to deal with issues associated with understanding your instructions, okay? And so it's very important that you make those learning objectives as clear as possible, okay? Be consistent with your communications. Set expectations. You can read these, but again, this says pretty much the same thing as the first one. Set up an environment where learners can interact. Okay. Including resource links within your lessons. Remember now, when you create a video lecture, when you create a narrated presentation, excuse me, you're going to try to build in as much diversity in your lesson to take care of the 3 kinds of learners that you're going to have as possible. But you're not always going to be very successful in doing that. Okay? And so when you deliver a classroom presentation, what do you have going on in front of you? You've got students that are pretty much into 3 different groups. Okay? You've got the students that get it the first time you teach it, right? Boom, I got it. I understand it. I'll get an A on the quiz at the end of the week. I know what you're asking. You got the students on the other end of the extreme that just didn't get it with this kind of a presentation, this async presentation. I didn't understand it. And then you got the majority of the students in the middle, okay? Some of them leaning toward I got everything, other leaning toward I didn't. And so by creating a lesson with these additional resource links in them, you are actually helping your student, all 3 groups of students. I tell my students, I say, look, when you create your lesson, okay, I want to see at the end of your lesson follow-on activities, okay? And they have to be 2 kinds of follow-on activities. Now, frankly, she didn't do, oh yeah, she did. Here's her additional resource. Okay, I want what I would call enrichment activities. That's for the students over here that got it. They don't need to go back through this again. They got it. But let's give them some real high-powered additional materials that they can go learn even more about this. Things that I'm not going to cover in the class because I don't have the time to do that. And then there are other materials for other students called remedial resources. And some of my students that do the best identify those as enrichment activities, remedial. And the remedial obviously is for this group over here. who are saying, look, I didn't get it. Maybe if I watched another YouTube video, maybe if you showed me an Annenberg site, that maybe that would help me move myself into the middle. Okay. And so all of those possibilities would be suggested as part of your lesson. Okay. Excuse me. And then take this one very seriously. Let's make this as big as we can. Your job in an asynchronous environment changes. Okay. You can't be like the college professor that I mentioned that says, here it is, I'll see you in 8 weeks. Okay. Your job changes from one of what we all call the age on the stage. Okay. The professor in front of the class doing the lecturing changes to one of a facilitator, one that monitors the student's progress. That's why you got to give them dates. That's why you got to give them deadlines. Okay. And some of the students will come to you and say, I didn't get it done this week. Okay. You'll have to decide whether that's okay or not, and take steps either way. But you have to guide their understanding. You have to make sure they're completing the projects. You have to do the kinds of things that need to be successful. Okay. Last thing I want to cover today is something that I hope you had a thought about. Okay. Oops. Hang on a second here. Where's it at? Oh, there it is. Okay. I am going to send you the textbook. I said you get it free. You get it as part of taking the workshops that we're delivering. And this workshop or this book is called Mastering the 5th Level of the Technology Domain. Okay. Sorry about that. Mastering the 5th level of the technology domain. If you remember Bloom, okay, and the pyramid I showed you early, he had 6 levels, right? And that was the domain, the cognitive domain, the domain of learning and understanding. He also worked back in the 1950s with scholars who created the affective domain, teaching things like values and concepts. Okay, we didn't even look at that one. And then there was a third group that created the psychomotor domain, gross and fine motor skills, dealing with the physical pieces. Well, I started looking at the 4th domain, the domain of technology. And you will see in the book, and I just want to show you this real quickly, that I wanted to create a 4th domain for technology. And I won't go through this. I'll certainly let you read this on your own. And I realize this is a little hard. Let's see. Let me see how big I can make it so that you can see it better. Okay, good. I created the technology domain back in 2001. It has since made me untold millions of dollars as the author of this particular concept. Obviously not. But it is something for you to finally, in this first workshop, think about. So we're kind of coming full circle now. We talked a little bit about the kinds of learning styles. And we talked about the different tools. And I want to wrap up this workshop this morning. We're talking about the technology domain. And the last element you need to think about, and probably something that has come alive with you since your students have gone online. But think about this. before I can teach you how to use honor thy father and mother to evaluate a particular set of circumstances. Okay? I had to teach you how to understand it. I had to teach you to be able to define it and to list it. I had to teach you how to use it. You went up those pyramids. Well, we haven't really done that so much with our kids when it comes to technology. Okay? There are certain literacy skills, certain basic literacy skills in technology that your student had to be able to use before I can send them a PowerPoint, before I can have them watch a video. And let's just use the chat room for just a second. What are some of those basic literacy skills that your students may or may not have had when you started working with them online? You were in class on Friday, you were online on Monday, for God's sake. What skills became an issue for you? Write down a few of them. Phonemic awareness. I want you to explain that, Candy, because I'm not sure I know what that is. So hang on a second. What other technology literacy skills did the students? Computer terminology. Good. Okay. Excellent. How to write an email. Excellent. Basic literacy skills. They didn't know how to upload their assignments. Absolutely. Okay. Finding materials. Sure. How do they find them online? I mean, I would hesitate to tell any high school kid to go out and search the internet for certain things. Okay. It would scare me to death. How to solve computer issues. Good. We had somebody already that said, my microphone didn't work. We never gave you the skills for simple being able to use those tools. How to use a mouse, for God's sake. I remember one of the first workshops I did with some Catholic school teachers at Duquesne. When I was at Duquesne, we had them in this workshop, and they were all in this wonderful lab. And how to mute a microphone. Right on, Gretchen. Absolutely. I had them all in this workshop, and I said, okay, we're going to go out. We're going to go around the internet, and we're going to teach them. We're going to find some really neat internet sites, websites. I said, everybody, grab your mouse and click on the web on this link that's on your page already. They didn't even have to find it. It was already there. Click on the link. And so I'm watching about 30 teachers in front of me, and most of them are clicking on links and doing some pretty cool stuff. And they're saying, oh, this is nice. This is good. I could use this. And I had one little old nun sitting in the back, and God bless her. She's back there, and I could just see the confusion all over her face. And she said, Dr. Tomey, this is not working. I can't get anything to work. So I walked back there and I said, okay, sister, what are you doing? She says, and she grabbed the mouse and she picked it up and she started clicking at it like the screen. I said, well, you know enough about a TV remote to know how to use that. This doesn't work the same way. The computer mouse doesn't work unless it's sitting on the ground. And once you put it back on the ground and started clicking, everything went right. So you're all giving me a whole slew of suggestions on the issue of literacy and why some things work and other things. But you cannot make the assumption that your students will be able to do an interactive lesson if they don't know how to upload, if they don't know how to attach an email, if they don't know how to transfer a file. And who's going to teach them that? It's got to be you. It's got to be you. Unless they have an older brother or sister, or sometimes maybe a younger brother or sister, they're going to need a little bit of your help. And so you got to build that into teaching online. Okay? You can't count on the parents. One of the online sessions that I do every month, once a month, is I host a chapter meeting, council meeting for my Knights of Columbus. Okay. My Knights of Columbus guys. Now, you want to see a bunch of older guys trying to play with computers. All right. I mean, they're all over the place. And I always tell them, I said, look, go get your fifth grade grandchild and have him stand behind you, and he'll make sure you're okay, because they're fine with most of this stuff. So, but literacy, okay, very important skill you have to teach. Somebody mentioned this a minute ago about like writing emails. That's the second stage, collaboration. Okay, just because they know how to send an email doesn't mean they understand the etiquette of sending emails. You know, you don't put everything in caps. You don't email everybody and his brother when you really only wanted to send this to one person. Those kinds of skills. The third level of the taxonomy is decision making. Okay, they need to understand that you're using these tools to learn, to make decisions. Okay, and then these next two levels are your levels as the teacher. Okay, and here's the fifth level, teaching with technology. Okay, they have to be able to learn with technology first. So your students will probably stay right here at stage number 4, where they're going to get the materials that you're sending them and they're going to learn with it. Okay, very important. You're up here at level number 5, where you're teaching with it, almost at the very, very top. Okay. And then, well, you know, the top level, I call it technology. It's actually technology-ology. Okay. Ology is the study of, right? So technology-ology is the study of technology. And that's why, so nobody likes that word, but this is, again, how you're going to use in the things that we have run across already in moving to an online environment. Huge issues with access, with internet speed, with computers and what they have in their homes. I had, you know, my two grandkids are constantly fighting over the computer because there's one computer in the class or in the home, and they both have to be online, sometimes at the same time. Okay, so all of these things associated with the uses of technology in our world make it very, very difficult. Okay, I'm going to stop presenting. We've been talking now for the better part of 2 hours. Would anybody like to put a comment into the chat room that might start any kind of discussion we have in the last 3 minutes? What did you get out of this session that you think you could use? Maybe in a way that I didn't even mention, which would be even better. Okay. We'll give people a few seconds to enter into the chat room. We're still talking about asynchronous stuff here. Tomorrow we'll hit the synchronous side. When we talk about chat sessions tomorrow, one of the things that learner site looks great. It really is. I mean, it's terrific. You'll love the action buttons, and it walks you right through it in the textbook. Okay, so they're fairly easy to follow. Anybody that would like an example of an interactive lesson, something maybe one of my students did, I'll massage it so the names are out. One of the things about PowerPoint that I always tell my students is never start from scratch with a PowerPoint, right? It takes too long to start from scratch. Find somebody else's presentation that at least has got something in there that you like, or at least looks good, and just cut, copy, paste, and edit, right? And so I will be glad to send you an interactive lesson that you can use, okay? So we can do that if you want. Annenberg Media seems to be a popular one. Charlena, you said you would love an example. An example of what? Here. Yeah, unmute and talk to me. That's fine. She doesn't want to. Oh, the PowerPoint with action. Okay. Yeah, I'll be glad to send people an interactive lesson. Okay. I've got just about 11 o'clock. And while university professors are usually known to go over, I'm a behavioral learning professor, and I usually try to stick right on the money here. So let me just let Bobby say any final words before you all head off to lunch and get ready for Dr. Hansen this afternoon. Bobby?
Dr. Tomei, will you send me all the documents and then I can push them out to the staff? Okay, perfect. I want to thank all of you, and I think it brings a lot of things to mind, like I put in the chat. Our kids are tech savvy, but we take it for granted that they know what to do. So we really have to step back and take them, guide them through baby steps as to all of these simple things that we do take for granted that they know what to do. So it makes you rethink. So thank you for everything you've done today with us, and look forward to the session with Dr. Hansen this afternoon.
Okay, Mary, would you like to make any prep comments?
Just a minute, I guess. I'll just say we're going to talk a little bit about assessment this afternoon, and start with an overview of validity, because really anytime you're assessing, you really have to think of the big picture of what you're doing and why you're doing it. And then I was going to talk a little bit about how Google Slides, or Google Forms can be used to create assessments, and introduce an add-on that is called Pear Deck. I see someone made a reference to Nearpod, and it's kind of a similar add-on that you can do some formative checks for assessment also and get the information back in real time. So.
Super.